The movie opens aboard a plane that is traveling to Novosibirsk in Russia with only a handful of passengers. A flight attendant is making a hot drink and takes it to a mother. She is there with her sleeping 7-year-old daughter, Katya. During their flight, one of the engines starts to spark. Little Katya awakes only to find her mother has disappeared. The plane is experiencing some turbulence, but Katya is keeping herself together. She hears talking behind her. When she turns around, there is an old witch chanting spells. The plane's engine explodes and the plane goes down. It is now morning. The plane has crashed in the woods. We see little Katya walking with her squeaky leg brace. She stops, looks around and realizes she is the only survivor of the crash. It has been 20 years now since the devastating plane crash. Katya is now a mother herself. She is out with her 7-year-old daughter Diana, when a reporter along with his crew approaches her to interview her about the infamous tragedy. Katya agrees to do the interview. As the reporter asks her about that tragic day, Katya tells him that she tries not to think about that particular day any longer, and her life is much better now. She now works as a psychologist and believes in helping other people. Katya starts to feel uneasy with all the questions when Diana intervenes, telling the reporter her mother may still get triggered if she hears the squeaks of a leg brace, as it takes her back to her childhood. Katya is no longer afraid of flying, and Diana tells the reporter that they are flying out to see her grandpa tomorrow. It's night time and Katya and Diana have boarded a plane. There are not many passengers as many of them cancelled due to bad weather. Diana immediately runs to the back and tells her mother she'd like to sit there, but her mother tells her those aren't their seats. As the two get comfortable in their seats, a man who sits next to them introduces himself as Alexei. Sitting near the front of the plane, businessman Nikolai gets impatient and asks the attendant why they are not taking off. She tells him due to the bad weather, the plane has to be de-iced before taking off, and offers him whiskey, which of course he doesn't turn down. Alexei notices Katya's nervousness and he tells her to calm down, and assures her everything will be alright. An elderly couple, Yevgeny and Galina, are sitting near the back. Galina starts having a panic attack as she doesn't like flying. Katya, the doctor, notices this and goes to offer her help. She hands her a couple of stress relief pills. Her husband gives her a bottle of water and tells her to drink up. Sitting next to Nikolai is a hipster artist, Pavel. He asks Pavel what he is drawing. He tells him it's nothing special, but the drawings help him see things. The plane is about to take off and Katya is back in her seat. She begins hearing a metal squeak from above and starts panicking. She quickly walks to the lavatory to calm down, ignoring the attendant who tells her she must be seated. She takes some pills to calm her. While the attendants, Inessa and Tatiana, are going over the safety instructions, Katya is washing her face when she starts to suddenly hear her mother's voice. She turns around and sees the lavatory door looks different. She opens the door and finds herself back in her childhood home. She walks around until she finds another door. She opens it and it leads her back onto the plane. Katya decides to look around, and notices that the emergency exit is blocked. Before she gets stopped by the attendant, who tells her to get back to her seat, Alexei notices pills in her bag and asks if she is alright, but she doesn't answer, so Diana answers for her. Diana tells him that her mother was in a plane crash, and she is the only survivor, prompting Alexei to voice his condolences. The plane finally takes off and Katya apologizes to Alexei for being rude earlier. They make small talk when he reveals that he is a reporter, an ex-war correspondent, and has visited every war zone on the planet. The plane flies through the stormy night and everyone is fast asleep, when all of a sudden the sky turns red and scary-looking palms appear on the windows. The two attendants are wide awake, unaware of what's going on. The next scene shows young Katya having supper with her mother, and asks her mother if the scar on her leg will heal soon, but her mother tells her that it might stay with her for the rest of her life. As they are eating, young Katya looks up and notices that her mother looks disfigured in her reflection in the mirror. Then she looks back at her mother and asks if it's really her, and isn't she supposed to be dead? Her mother assures her that she is well and alive, and that it's been 3 months now since the flight. While the mother goes to wash the dishes, young Katya begins to hear weird sounds and then notices her mother's body starts to contort strangely. It was just a nightmare and she awakes due to turbulence. The rest of the passengers are awake also. The turbulence persists, and Yevgeny suddenly loses consciousness, prompting the attendants as well as the other passengers to rush to his aid. Katya, who is medically trained, instructs them on what to do. They lay the man down on the ground and Katya starts to perform CPR. Then suddenly, Yevgeny wakes up looking possessed, starts choking Katya and whispers strange words before passing out again. Katya gets scared and freezes at the sight of a shadowy hand reaching from behind the seat. Everything stops, then suddenly the whole plane starts to shake due to extreme turbulence. Oxygen masks come out and the rest of the passengers are forced to fasten themselves to the nearest seats. The stewardess then grabs the extra oxygen tank and rushes to Diana, but she is thrown against the ceiling and is knocked out cold. Diana is shouting for her mother, but Katya slowly loses consciousness from the lack of oxygen, and recalls a memory of the old lady from her flight 20 years ago. When she wakes up, the turbulence has stopped. She rushes back to a frightened Diana and assures her that she won't leave her again. Meanwhile, Alexei is checking on Tatiana and helps her up. Alexei's hand starts shaking and Katya notices this. She then starts telling him about the old witch she saw on the flight 20 years ago, and how she thinks the old lady is behind this, because the strange words Yevgeny whispered to her earlier was similar to the old lady's. Katya tells Alexei, everyone on the plane died back then, except her, and maybe the witch has come back to finish what she started. Alexei, however, doesn't believe her and says that the man's death was completely natural, and that Katya must be hallucinating because of the pill she took. Katya disagrees. Katya moves her daughter to another seat, then checks her leg. The scar has vanished. She walks over to grieving Galina to express her condolences. When she comes back to Diana, she sees her drawing of a plane where they are sitting in the back seat. But she again says those aren't their seats, and they return to their original seats. Katya mentions to Alexei that she noticed his hand shaking. He tells her it happened 5 years ago whilst covering a story, and there was an explosion where he was stuck under some rubble. Once again, Katya claims she heard her mother's voice before takeoff, and thinks she was trying to warn her about something. Meanwhile, in the front row, Nikolai the businessman tries to talk with the hipster artist again, telling him that he has been traveling for over a week and just wants to go home to his family. He gets up and shows him pictures of his kids, but the hipster keeps drawing something which is revealed to be a sketch of the businessman smoking. Back to Katya, she is still convinced that something's not right, and mentions that the scar on her leg has disappeared despite seeing it that morning. Alexei tells her they will land soon and everything will be fine. She makes a remark on how odd it is that they did not hear anything from the captain in that kind of situation. Alexei starts getting a migraine, while at the same time, Diana seems to be having a conversation with someone in the row behind them. Katya asks her who she is talking to. Diana tells her she was talking to a girl, who ominously told Diana that Katya will leave her again. There is an announcement that the plane will now change course because of the storm, and will now be landing in Novosibirsk, the same city little Katya was flying to with her mother 20 years ago. Nikolai is angry at the decision to divert the plane, and grabs Inessa's arm, telling her he didn't pay to land in Novosibirsk. Inessa stays calm and asks if he would like another drink. Shortly after, it is revealed that the oxygen tank is leaking underneath Nikolai's seat. Inessa walks by and Katya notices something is not right about her. There is some kind of liquid leaking through the ceiling right above Nikolai. He decides to take out a cigarette. Katya sees this and quickly runs to him, telling him to put it out, but it's too late. He lights up, and goes ablaze as the liquid hits the lighter. As he is burning, Katya looks into the fire and sees a scary face screaming at her before the attendants rush to put the fire out. He is covered with a fireproof blanket. Alexei takes it off him and he is still alive but severely burned and in pain. Katya rushes back to Diana, but ends up seeing the shadowy figure again. She looks out of the window and all of a sudden, she finds herself back in her house with her daughter, the day before this flight. She checks her leg and the scar is still there. She then embraces her daughter, and suggests that they should cancel their trip tomorrow and just stay at home, which Diana agrees to. Katya is in the bathroom. She takes out her pills and decides she no longer wants to take them and flushes them down the toilet. She then exits the bathroom and hears a noise. She looks through the peephole on the door. The lights in the hall start to flicker. As she steps away, a shadowy hand grabs her face. Katya then starts hearing her daughter's voice, but she is nowhere to be found. Suddenly, the house starts shaking, and her daughter is angrily yelling at her for leaving her. Yet again, she gets transported back to the plane. She is on the floor. Diana runs up to her, and says to her that the mother just walked past her and did not even notice her. Katya hugs and kisses her and asks for forgiveness. Diana is about to tell her mother something but gets interrupted by Alexei, who needs Katya's help in taking care of the burnt man. After taking a look at him, she says that his airways are blocked and he can't breathe. She tells Alexei to hold his head straight to help him breathe. While she's going through the first aid kit, Alexei asks her why she blanked out earlier. She tells him that she started having visions, making her confuse her reality with nightmares. Across from her, the hipster is still drawing while mumbling weird words to himself, which irritates Katya. She loses her cool and starts yelling at him, but Alexei stops her. She turns her attention to Nikolai, who is trying to say something, when the hipster tells her, Nikolai is trying to reach for his mobile phone. The hipster helps get out the phone and shows Nikolai a wallpaper of him with his family. After seeing his family's faces for the last time, Nikolai takes his last breath and passes away. Alexei covers him with a blanket. Katya apologizes to the hipster for yelling at him. He introduces himself as Pavel. Katya goes back to her seat with her daughter when she notices Galina isn't in her seat, and has been in the lavatory for a while. Getting worried, Katya walks up to the lavatory and bangs on the door telling Galina to open up. This annoys the attendant Inessa, who tells Katya to go and sit back down. Attendant Tatiana opens the door, but Galina has vanished. When Katya is about to return to her seat, she notices Yevgeny's eyes are open. He stares at her, before pushing her, making her fall onto the seats. She is held down by a number of dark hands, then notices what row she is in. She snaps back to reality, then sees the shadowy figure, which she thinks is trying to tell her something. Katya then rushes up to her daughter, and insists that they should leave the plane immediately, but Diana doesn't want to. Alexei tells Katya to stop it, and as he gets up, he has blood coming out of his eye, before passing out. The two attendants come rushing, saying he needs medical attention. Inessa is trying to keep Katya from exiting the plane. Tatiana suddenly starts vomiting water, until she collapses and dies. Katya starts accusing Inessa for being responsible for everything that's happening. She then walks up to Pavel and snatches his sketchbook of him. Katya goes through the drawings, realizes that he's somehow been drawing her visions. As soon as she gets the hint about the exit, Pavel's body dissipates into thin air. Yet still, Inessa and even Alexei try to convince Katya to not go to the pilot's cabin door. They tell her that they're simply trying to protect her from something. But then, Inessa gets pulled away by an invisible force, and Alexei starts bleeding out of his head, until he collapses and dies. Katya breaks through the pilot's door, but instead, she enters into another cabin that looks exactly like the one she just came from. She feels like she's in a never-ending plane, but she carries on full steam ahead, going through one door after another until she finds herself in a completely different-looking cabin from the previous one. Suddenly, she notices her daughter is no longer by her side, but rather, at the other end of the cabin, when a shadowy figure appears and Katya runs to get to her. At this point that the movie's plot shifts dramatically, as it is revealed that none of this was real, and Katya is still actually on the doomed plane that we knew was going to crash 20 years ago. The old witch, who Katya always thought had caused the crash, tells her that she put her to sleep, because she did not want the little Katya to see how terrible death is. And all the visions she had been seeing are just a glimpse of a future life she's not going to have. Since Katya keeps trying to wake up and prove that she doesn't want to die, the old lady releases Katya from her spell, and Katya's destiny is now in her own hands. We are now back 20 years ago, where we see all the same people on the plane and sitting in the same seats as in the future. Galina and her husband Yevgeny are sitting a few rows behind, when Yevgeny suddenly gets a heart attack and little Katya's mother comes to his aid. For the last time, the sleeping little Katya returns to her hallucination to say goodbye to her imaginary daughter Diana, during which Diana tells her to simply listen and pay attention to the little clues she's been given throughout this hallucination in order to save herself. When little Katya finally wakes up, we are taken back to the scene of the plane going down at the beginning of the movie. Little Katya crawls toward the back seats, and manages to get to her mother, who is passed out. In this horrendous situation, little Katya also witnesses all the other passengers die one by one. Alexei then scoops her up, and helps them buckle up in the back seats, but unfortunately, he is killed by an explosion. The plane crashes down into the lake, and only little Katya and her mother survive, by being seated in none other than row 19. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more cool videos.